So, hey, welcome to Silicon Heartland Sessions. Part of what makes our community so special are the great leaders in our IT community. And today I'm talking with Warner Moore, who's the founder of GammaForce.io and the Tech Community Coalition. He's also very active in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Thanks for joining me today, my friend. We've got a lot to discuss.
My pleasure, Shauna. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks everyone for joining.
Hell yeah. Hey, so why don't we start by briefly talking about your IT journey, and where I think it's fair to say that you've taken a very, in my opinion, non-traditional route. And just to set some context, I understand you have a strong connection to a certain song by Nirvana. Obviously, a huge Nirvana fan myself. I won't mention the name of the song, but for those listeners that are Nirvana fans, lyrics from this song include things like, just because you're paranoid, don't mean they're not after you, and gotta find a better way when I'm there. So, Warner, to me, this song conveys themes of, rebellion, challenging the status quo, striving for authenticity. And as you think about your own professional journey, how have these themes informed and influenced you personally?
Got to find a way. Yeah, it's interesting. I've found that those sorts of attributes are more commonly shared in entrepreneurial circles, right? Often it's driving change, and that was really what inspired my interest in technology early on, with the early days of the internet. It was academic largely at that time, but bunch of smart folks around the world talking to each other and sharing information, learning. So not only was it a great way to speak to diverse folks, it was a great platform to learn on.
Heck yeah. Yeah, that was very, very exciting times.
Oh yeah, it was. It's funny to think of how far we've gone. I'll never forget the first time I saw a URL or a website on a billboard, and I just got back from San Francisco, and there's some of the nerdiest billboards you can imagine there.
I
Different
hear
world now.
it. Yeah, this is very, very true. So you've taken a very interesting route in your career. I understand you started off pursuing, your journey in the enterprise, and then transitioned to what you do today as an entrepreneur. Um, Maybe you can share with our listeners, what your story is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, being interested in the leading areas of technology at the time, it really directed me to the companies that were innovating with the latest technologies. And back then, lots of open source technologies were taking over commercial Unix and early internet technologies. And if we looked at the landscape at the time, those who were adopting those technologies were really more entrepreneurial organizations. So I had a bit of a entrepreneurial mindset by default, but really my passion was about taking modern technology and using it to drive change and solve
Hmm.
real problems. So it
Heck yeah.
really got me active in the startup space.
That's exciting. So, were there any like specific, products? You mentioned open source. Were there any specific, products back then that really were like the served as like the tipping point for you, that or maybe a source of inspiration for you?
I'm not sure I or C would count. I mean, really all internet technologies, right?
Yeah.
HTTP, but before that, Usenet. I was active using news groups. One of our old school internet protocols that has since been fully depreciated. We don't have many of those. But I'd say really just the tools that enabled us to share and communicate across geographically separated spaces. So
Yeah.
distributed computing was really an early passion for me.
Yeah, and I remember the first time I used AOL Instant Messenger. It blew my mind at the time. The fact that I could sit there and type something, and then somebody across the world would see it immediately, and they could respond back and forth. It was really amazing.
Yeah, it truly was. It's funny thinking back, if that might have been one of the first technologies that really got mainstream adoption. I mean, sure, we had email, um, UUCP, and then SMTP came later, but email was still kind of an obscure thing, but instant messaging got a whole lot of adoption.
Yeah,
ICQ before that, before
that's
AIM
right.
opened up the network to the world.
Hmm. Yeah. So, and it sounds to me like, there's an intersection there between the technology, and for you, it was really, the art of the possible. What, was really around this idea of using the internet to connect people and using technology to be able to, form relationships and so forth. When we were talking earlier, you'd mentioned one of the books that you've used, to help guide your thinking, relative to leadership and so forth, is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it's clear to me that relationships and networking are really important and have played a really big role in your success. Would Can you maybe talk about how, relationships and networking? I have to imagine that's a key element of the entrepreneurial mindset.
Well, Sean, you told me I needed to be more controversial, so we'll see if I live up to your expectations there. Maybe not my default these days, but admittedly, when I was teenage, my default mode of operation tended to be maybe a little more, well, less refined. Let's put it that way. And I'll never forget when I was around 17. I was having some, I'll call it debates with my father, and he dropped one of the early copies of Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People on my desk. And
Uh-huh.
well, always been an avid reader, and I read it, and I found it really influential, and maybe not in the moment, but the concept stuck with me, and I rereading the book multiple times. And while in Dale Carnegie, there's a little book, if you ever do the training, which I did many years later.
Hmm.
I think it's called the Golden Book, and it contains the principles within the book, and a lot of it's just be nice to people, be empathetic and
Heck
thoughtful.
yeah.
And when it comes to networking and stuff like that, networking almost feels like a dirty word to me. I think of it as just hanging out with folks, having good conversations, creating value in the world. How can we help each other out, right? Ultimately, people are what the world is all about. Every single thing we do, people are a meaningful part of it.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. We've talked quite a bit about the nonprofit space and how involved you are, like with like Cloud Ravana and so forth. And one of our values that I believe that we share is that, there's something to be said for investing in others and not worrying about what you're going to get in return. Now we're so late now. You get on LinkedIn and all these other places. Everybody wants to sell you something, and it's counterintuitive to think about in my mind, for at least for a lot of people. The idea that, you know there's more value that I'll get from somebody or from a community or from an organization if I just give of my time and my energy. Good things will happen.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like here in Columbus, we call it the Columbus Way. I think that those values are more commonly shared here than some other places, based on my travels and interactions in the professional communities. The way I look at it is very simply, right? I don't consider what I'm going to get out of it. Now, admittedly, I have to be cognizant of my time. There's only so much time in the day. We all have a endpoint in our participation in this world. So it's more about what value am I giving? Or what value am I putting in the world? Are the things that I'm doing and helping with aligned to my values,
Hmm.
my company's vision and values? And that's really how I think about things. It's if I'm making a positive contribution and giving to the world, um, it's going to work out in the end.
No
Will I
kidding.
get something? Maybe, maybe not.
Right.
Frankly, I don't care.
I love it. That's such an amazing way to approach your relationships and your career. Sort of thinking about your career trajectory and the path that you've taken. Obviously, as you said, networking is important. Being empathetic, being kind, investing in others, and so forth. Obviously, are all very very important. When I go back to that song, kind of bucking the trend and being able to take risks, I would imagine play into your story as well. Are there like, valuable lessons or practices that have propelled your success?
Well, I'll ground in what you said about risk. And there are so many cliches in entrepreneurial and business and career circles. Something someone might hear commonly in the startup world is fail fast. Well, the part we don't talk about is there's a privilege that lets people fail fast and multiple times, and
Hmm.
not everyone has that privilege. And the there are many examples where even those who created something then from nothing, some of our biggest companies in the world, they had a lot of opportunities through their upbringing, their parents' resources,
Yeah.
and that's fine. I welcome it. If folks are building value, giving value, game on. I support you regardless of your background. Um, but when it comes to risk, I think that's different for everyone.
Yeah.
There's opportunity cost depending on the decisions we make at different times. A conversation I had with the young man once who didn't come from privilege, didn't have family wealth, a very sharp, dedicated, smart, went through school, so it's not like he didn't have some foundation. But if he started a company and failed, well, uh, the worst case scenarios are worse than some other people. So,
Hmm.
in some cases, I might recommend that someone first focus on a career as opposed to that romanticism we create about dropping out of school and founding a company when one is really young. Um, so I talk with middle-aged people later in their career, and they look at it as being really risky leaving a career to start something. And
Right.
they might have meaningful wealth built from their years of retirement savings and tons of career history. So the risk there is small. And the same could be said at somebody mid-level, a mid-level engineer who has highly valuable expertise. What's the risk at working in a startup versus a large tech company?
Hmm.
Well, in my mind, very little risk, but if it doesn't work out, they can get a job. No, there's a lot in the details, right? But I think in our culture, we often frame a risk in ways that is outsized, right? We get in a car every day. It's one of the riskiest things we can do statistically.
Yeah.
And we're scared of jumping out of an airplane with a parachute. And it's one of the safer things we can do statistically. So I look at risk as personal, situational, but be calculated, right? There's a way to take calculated risk without having a lot of risk, a high risk of a negative outcome, right?
Right, right. I would imagine then, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I would imagine a part of managing that risk and that balance between, risk and what you mentioned earlier about privilege. And again, when I hear the term privilege, a part of it, yeah, has to do with potentially the way you were raised and the kind of means you come from and so forth. But another big part of it is what you've created for yourself, the planning you've done along the way, the important decisions that you've made along the way to, like you said, to put away for savings and things like that. But I imagine another piece of it, and I'm really interested to understand this, is diving into things and doing things that you're truly passionate about. Not just seeing an entrepreneurial opportunity that might be a niche to fill, but making sure that the things that you're pursuing are things that you are truly passionate about. And
Mm.
when you talk about like GammaForce.io and the Tech Community Coalition, I imagine that these are things that were born out of your passion for security, your passion for community.
Yeah, that's very true. Your observation is spot on. Uh, th- there's a lot of anecdotes right now about how some people who were raised being told to follow their passion, whereas others were not. That's maybe a short-sighted lesson to share with a young person. And I'm more pragmatic, right? Now, uh, we're people, and all of us are different, and uh, we have opportunities to make an impact with the limited time we have in the world. So I think there's, in many cases, people have skills and experience and knowledge that can be harnessed in different ways. If someone's building a meaningful company, it's going to take about 10 years based on stats. And
Hmm.
that's if it doesn't fail. So if somebody is going to do something for at least 10 years to make it successful, if you're not passionate about it, it's going to be a hard, long slog.
No kidding.
And
Well
if
said.
you're creating something, well, you have the choice not to create something you hate. So that's one way to
Well
look at it.
said.
And then some passions like music, right? Highly competitive. Everyone wants to do it. Very
Sure.
difficult career to take off.
Hmm.
It's difficult every step of the way. So if somebody isn't passionate about that, they're going to give up. And the whole thing is doing a thing that's difficult, that takes a long time. Giving up isn't an option.
This is true. That's very, very well said. You've used the term passion quite a bit. When I think about my relationship with you and getting to know you over the years and so forth, I know how passionate you are about the community and all of these values that you've been talking about are born out of your passion for the community, and in particular the startup community and the nonprofit space and Columbus and the Columbus ecosystem. And I'm curious, I know you're deeply involved in several social issues. What are some of these, social issues that you're passionate about, and how do you actively contribute to them?
Yeah, community's always been a big part of my life. Early days of the internet, right? It was all communities, primarily folks who are passionate about sharing information and learning. And uh, I built nonprofit communities on the internet early on, and intentionally chose not to take them for profit because I thought it would have devalued what was created in the first place. I had a website that was getting thousands of hits a month in the early aughts, and doesn't sound like much right now, but it was a big deal back then. And as far as community in-person events, one of the first I ever attended was 2600 meetings, which was early computer security uh, group.
Wow.
Um, the so with that, it was all a bit organic, right? I I think that engineers tend to get really focused on a problem space,
Hmm.
and that's by nature, right? Having to dig into details, figure out how something works, build it. So it's easy to get really heads down, and then when it comes to building relationships, community, career skills, doing the care and feeding of things that help support long-term career success, it's easy to miss that.
Yeah.
So a lot of the work I do through Tech Community Coalition, where our mission is to enable the tech and startup communities through charity and education, it ties to that. These groups are platforms for technologists and other professionals to share their experience, their what they know. Often they're driving and leading change in their fields. It's an opportunity to share with people who might not have access to that information as easily, and an opportunity for us to work together and grow. So I think that when it comes to social causes, I don't often think of it in the context of a list of the typical social causes and pick one, right?
Hmm.
What is that? Adult education. I don't find myself thinking about adult education ever, but maybe it's that.
Sure.
And I think it's important to help folks. So many other social causes I support. I'm on the Life Care Alliance board IT committee, which
Hmm.
is the biggest Meals on Wheels program
Yeah.
in Ohio and one of the biggest in the country. So,
Yeah, they are
yeah,
amazing.
community is important, right?
Yeah, I would agree. You turned me on to the book by Adam Grant. It's called "Give and Take" and why helping others drives our success. And I learned a lot from that book. The idea that there are different interaction styles. There's givers, there's takers, there's matchers, and so forth. But I thought the most important thing for me, at least, that really resonated was the interconnection between success and reciprocity. I'm just wondering how it sounds to me like a big part of your worldview in being an entrepreneur and what drove you to being an entrepreneur was really about this whole notion of giving of yourself, finding those things that are the most passionate, giving of yourself, and then letting that be the bedrock or the foundation for your own professional and personal success.
Yeah, I love that book. Adam Grant's one of my favorite authors and a fantastic researcher when it comes to organizational psychology. And it really helped me rethink just all those concepts. And it's research based. So it's not a
Hmm.
bunch of anecdotes like a lot of business books tend to be. And, and there have been times in my career where feel a bit beat down, right? Giving a lot, putting a lot of energy out, and the short term feedback loop for that isn't always positive, at least in my experience, right?
Yeah.
So it's easy to get burnout, get exhausted, feel like the impact is one sided. And I think that's a big challenge. In fact, he explores that exact scenario. And it really helped me reframe some of those situations and
Hmm.
really just get over it, right? It's like, well, okay, I might feel this way right now, but it'll work out in the end.
Yeah.
And
No kidding.
a lot of things are so transactional in society. In the moment, it can feel wrong. It's like, I've been taken advantage of, or I'm doing this thing to help, but what I see coming back isn't positive for me. Um, a good way to illustrate that is in management or in a career. Uh, a bit of a anecdote is if you can't be replaced, you can't be promoted. And I've lived by
Well
that
said.
philosophy for a long time.
Heck yeah.
Now, there are organizational cultures that I'd say are less positive, where if somebody empowered others in their team to make themselves replaceable and not a single point of failure,
Hmm.
that organization might look at them as redundant as opposed to recognizing the impact and leadership that they um, executed in the organization. So that's just one very specific example where
Hmm.
if somebody does that and we treat them that way, that's a negative feedback loop.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I managed to get through it without taking the wrong lessons from it. I hope others do too.
I think that's a really, really interesting topic. When you think about, um, all of the examples that you gave about, being vulnerable with others and feeling like you're potentially being taken advantage of, or that your vulnerability is seen as a weakness as opposed to a strength, and managing that perception and so forth. But I'm a believer that resilience comes from within. And no matter where you go, whether you're in the corporate world or you're an entrepreneur, you're in the nonprofit space, whatever, wherever you are, even in your personal life, friends and family and so forth, the only place that resilience can come from is from within yourself. Are there things that you've done? Are there habits that you have that, that sort of provide a foundation of strength for yourself? So when you are faced with those moments, you're able to recognize it and, ideally turn it into something positive.
Resilience is super important. I've read some, and probably Harvard Business Review recent articles exploring resilience. Right,
Yeah.
it's an attribute that's sought out in modern organizations, and certainly resilience has helped me over the years. It's how things affect me. I'm not super emotional by default, so things that it's easy for me to engage with things more neutrally and consider data facts, and not just react in the moment. But admittedly, some earlier executive coaching helped me with that a lot.
Yeah.
I was in a challenging leadership culture at the time, and folks tended to treat each other poorly, yelling at them. So
Yeah.
being in environments like that, it's even though talking about it now, it sounds ridiculous. It's normalized when you live it every day. And one of the exercises the coaches taught was being aware of your emotions and not responding in emotion.
Mm. Which is so
So
hard. I mean, that is a skill that takes practice.
oh, it does. And it sounds so simple, but these simple skills that take practice are so impactful. So if I'm angry, I acknowledge it and pause. I'm sure as heck not going to respond to a team member in the moment and react based on the emotion. I tell you what, when I come back to it hours or maybe hours later, maybe the next day, my reaction and response is much higher quality than it would be otherwise.
I hear you, man.
And we all
Yeah.
get stressed and worn down,
Hmm.
and I'm no different. But I think we can consider how we're engaging as a whole, and not even that. Are there opportunities to improve? And working on it. We all have opportunities. Lifelong learning opportunities.
This is very, very true. So thinking about all of these kinds, your what you bring to the table personally, with your experience and so forth. Obviously, you run multiple companies, and you know, I would argue that the key success to any company is its people. It really comes down to culture. If we've talked about Simon Sinek before, and one of the things he says is that so goes the culture, so goes the company. Likewise, so go the leaders, so go the culture. So leadership is critically important as well. So in your day to day, when you're managing these businesses and you're engaging in the community and so forth, what leadership skills do you believe make the most impact, especially in our industry?
Well, in tech, I think we have opportunities to consider the people part and prioritize it higher, right? Tech skills are certainly important, but people skills, I'd say, are equally, if not more important, depending on the work we're doing. One of our company values at Gamma Force is we put people first, and
Hmm.
we live that. Our clients, our team members, and make decisions that create value for all people in the ecosystem. If we're trending to low profitability over some months, it's easier to cut the team than it is to accept low profitability for a few months.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, Personally, I'd favor the latter. Every decision and thing I do, I consider all parties in the ecosystem, and I try and create situations where everyone wins. But coming back to your core point, the skills that sound simple and easy are often the opportunities that we all have to grow, especially in tech. Listening, how we communicate, empathizing, communicating to the audience, and uh, those things will help us be more impactful in all the things we do.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, very well said. Thinking about when you do have to go through hard times, and you have to make tough decisions, or maybe you've had the team has had a misstep and there was a failure, and God forbid there was like a security breach or something like that. Obviously, different failures have different outcomes and so forth. But when it comes to handling failure, how both personally and when leading your teams, how do you approach those situations?
Hmm. A lot of my career experience tied to technology operations. So, if we think about production outages or disaster recovery or security incident response, those triage activities are high stress.
Very
And
true.
admittedly, I developed a lot of skills through working through those scenarios over the years. Pardon me, would you ground me in the question again? I don't want to go off on a tangent.
Yeah, well, I was just kind of going up, get as we were talking about resilience and the importance of relationships and leadership and so forth. Those are, to me, the skills that you've talked about around empathy and listening and communicating and so forth. Part of the reason, or I think the biggest reason, well, maybe not the biggest reason, but a big reason
Oh,
why
failure.
those skills are so important is, yeah, when you hit an event where you've got to get through a tough time, or you experience a failure, how do you navigate those waters?
So we have those situations, and really all ground in, and thank you,
You're welcome.
ground in not blaming, right? It's a challenging situation. Oh, we got here one way or another. How do we get through it in the best way, best possible outcome to all stakeholders in a way that creates the least damage in the process?
Right.
And that's really difficult in the moment. And it doesn't always go well. And those situations are commonly caused by mistakes. And we're all humans, we all make mistakes. I don't care who you are. So I really, thinking about the team and people part, have learned to ground in blameless postmortems over the years.
Hmm.
Etsy was one of the first organizations to popularize it. And there are a lot of good examples of different ways to conduct them. It's different depending on what the organization is,
Hmm.
uh, and how they're operating. But it comes down to having a retrospective, exploring the situation, taking lessons learned, not placing blame on any individual, and doing that well helps our organizations become more resilient
Yeah.
and creates a culture of trust where everyone is going to be more effective in everything they do.
Very, very well said. Yeah, I would agree with you. When I think about a high performing culture or high performing organization, it's precisely that. It's cultures that are built on a foundation of safety and trust. Because only then, and to your point, that the thing that's going to test you as a leader in driving that culture is when things go haywire and mistakes are made. Are we going to become a better company on the other side of this? And are we going to retain our culture? Are we going to protect that culture? Or will it be an opportunity for us to go the other way? Because, to your point, it's, as a leader, it takes a hell of a long time to build trust and safety. But man, you can damage it like that.
And good luck getting it back. It
Yeah.
doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah. Very, very well said. So thinking on the other side of the equation, how do when you're thinking about your strategy, your business strategy, and you've got this big audacious goal, or just you're laying out a vision, how do you inspire and align your team towards that common vision or goal? Because that's the other side of having a strong culture. It's not only being able to weather the storms and the challenges and so forth, but it's also being able to accelerate and being able to achieve the goals that you set out for your organization. So when you set out to accomplish some business goal, and you set out that vision, how do you inspire and align your team towards that?
Yeah, there are a lot of different methods depending on the level of organization and the function. In this case, I'll keep it pretty high level. And while talking about it, is the vision real? Is it what we're doing, what we're working toward? And then values. Are we making decisions based on it? Are we rewarding people based on it? Are we, frankly, punishing people based on it? If
Hmm.
one of our values is we put people first, and we have leaders in the organization that are being mean to their teams and colleagues, and we let them stick around, that is us not living our values. So maybe they're not a good fit for our organization.
Yeah.
And furthermore, the entire team has to be aligned to it, the leadership team in particular, because as decisions are made, they need to be congruent.
Right.
And if people are operating differently, especially in the leadership and management teams, it's just going to be another sign on the wall that people point and laugh at. Integrity. Ha ha.
Right.
Everyone has
Yeah.
integrity, right? What
Yeah.
does that mean?
Exactly. Yeah. If you talk the talk, but then you don't walk the walk, and you don't actually demonstrate those values through your actions, then yeah, your actions are absolutely going to speak louder than words. And that is what's going to absolutely drive your culture, or, I would say in this case, it's fractures in your culture. So having leaders, getting back to conversation we were having earlier about the qualities you're looking for in leaders, um, sounds to me like you want to make sure you've got leaders on your team that not only can say the right words, who are well versed in what our values are, but also demonstrate that in their day to day work and the things that they do.
Value alignment is key, right? And it's not a right or wrong thing, right? We put people first. Maybe somebody else's value is we always get the best results. But getting the best results at all costs means people are compromised. Sorry, you have to work 100 hours this week. We need to get this done.
Right.
Whereas maybe if we are putting people first, we step back and consider the order of events, commitments, how we can realign priorities and take care of the whole human, right? It's
Right.
not right or wrong, but if there's value misalignment in the team, uh, they're probably in the wrong place.
Right. Yeah. Well said, man. So the other side of, a high performing team isn't just, being able to execute, isn't just about being able to weather the storms. It's also being able to, keep up with technology trends and so forth. I think we'd agree. One of the things that brought us into technology is the fact that it continuously evolves, and it's a really, really exciting place to be. To surf that technology wave. It takes balance, it takes effort, it takes energy, it takes focus. So when you think about your team and continuously learning and growing, how do you carve out time, or how do you make sure that your team is staying up to speed on the latest technology advancements and so forth? And how do you personally do that?
Another one of our company values, we're always learning. And there are a lot of ways to make that real. I'll buy any book that anyone wants, right? And supporting the team's professional development, be it training classes or certifications or
Mm-hmm.
any sort of continuing education. Default answer is yes, right?
Excellent. Hell
It's
yeah.
not about the budget allocation. It's about like, cool, how do we get it done? But that's really the easy stuff. I think it's not only enriching ourselves, but how do we help the team grow too? And
Right.
having a team of exceptional folks, like folks who are top of their profession, really good at what they do, but people have different backgrounds and experience. There's
Mm-hmm.
always opportunities to learn in the team. We'll do lunch and learns where an internal project that somebody's been working on, they'll share with the team lessons learned. We do a similar thing with clients too, where if we're working on something interesting, we'll just get a lunch and learn and invite clients and friends. And the cool thing about stuff like that too is that it's a way the team can develop content to later give to user groups and conferences as well. So not only are we growing our team, we're growing the profession and creating more value in the world, contributing back to open source in areas that aren't tied to our core business or
Mm-hmm.
competitive advantage. If we use open source, get back to it. So just thinking about not only how are we developing ourselves, but how we're developing each other and the world and supporting it.
Heck yeah. I love it. Yeah, that is very inspirational. So maybe pivoting to technology, I think this is a really nice segue because we've talked a lot about corporate values and the values that you're driving into your companies and the way in which you operate on a day by day basis. We've also talked about how technology is continuing to evolve and so forth. Obviously, as a result of that, our the corporate landscape itself is evolving as well. The pandemic with the rise of Zoom and Teams and remote work and obviously artificial intelligence and so forth. How do you envision technology shaping the future of the workplace? And just to maybe to add a little bit of a little bit of spice to that is when it comes to the values that you espouse. um, Tell me if I'm wrong, but it feels to me like relationships and person to person contact, communication. You've talked about, talking through things and empathizing and listening and so forth are all key elements to the culture and the values that you're trying to build. Do you see technology as an enabler for that, or do you see it as a hindrance, or maybe somewhere in between?
Well, we're talking on technology right now. Certainly a lot more intimate than it would have been using some of our older technologies.
That's very true.
It acknowledging when Skype added video. I don't know the exact timeline, but I want to say it was over 10 years ago,
Yeah.
maybe a little too early. Yeah, it team's 100% remote and plan to keep it that way.
Hmm.
I don't think these things are mutually exclusive.
Got it. Hmm.
Having people centric values or sitting in an office or a shared space. Now, I think of a team working together in the context of uh, hybrid, I suppose. But we have no plans to get an office, and I can't
Hmm.
imagine a scenario where we will have one. That might change, and things
Hmm.
change, but no plans, and I don't expect to have them. The We use collaboration tools, video, messaging. We enable the team to work async. And we do have folks around the country. Some of our clients are around the country. And that's part of the lunch and learn exercise too. We'll do virtual lunch and learn so the
Hmm.
whole team can participate. And then we'll do local events for the team. And a lot of folks are around Columbus or around here. As the company grows, I plan to introduce more formal uh, cadences or rituals around how we get together in person. But I I don't think it's about the technology or really about the space. It's
Hmm.
just being thoughtful and how we work together and making sure that we're enabling people to be collaborative and
Yeah.
support each other.
I love that. I love that. There's lots of business owners, CEOs, COOs, CIOs that you read about that really struggle with the idea of finding the right balance between being fully remote or being hybrid or being fully in the office. So and I think there's something to be said for um, the role that technology plays. You made a really poignant point about how, hey, we're here talking right now. You get to see the inside of my room. I'm seeing the inside of your room. It is a two-dimensional kind of a surface, but it's a lot more intimate than talking over a phone or something like that. Um, what are some of the things that you wish businesses and or boards better understood about technology? It doesn't necessarily need to be within the context of remote work and things like that, but just in general. You're a technologist, you're also a business man, and I'm curious what your perspective is in terms of the opportunity for folks that are in business leadership roles to better understand technology.
I think a lot of organizations and traditional industries are perpetually behind, be it 5 or 10 or 20 years behind in technology. And I say that with some experience because some of the technology companies I helped build were taking advantage of that. We were creating modern technology capabilities to empower the organizations we worked with to be more effective because they couldn't build it themselves. Cover my meds is a good example of that. The I think as leaders, executives in our companies, traditional industry are not. Most of our industries can and will be changed by technology, past
Hmm.
and future. And if we build capabilities to take advantage of it and actually do it well, innovate with it, modern engineering practices,
Hmm.
we have a lot of opportunities to transform our businesses. And in many industries, that's competitive advantage. And
Great.
it's not just technology, it's also culture. The things we're talking about today, the leading engineers want.
Hmm.
They're not going to go through some tedious manual process to build a modern thing. So if our organizations aren't able to align to modern ways of working, we might not be able to build teams who can build modern technology.
Hmm.
So there are a lot of different parts to it, but I'll just ground in and emphasize that organizations that are embracing modern technologies and using it to transform the way our industries do business are going to have more market share, more profitability, provide more value to our customers. And if we're not doing that, our time might be more limited.
Very true. Very true. You're talking about a term that I think is pretty commonly used across business circles: digital transformation. We use that term quite a bit. I don't know that there's a consensus around what it means. I don't know how deeply our business partners, even folks on the technology side, really understand what digital transformation means. But I think you've summarized it very nicely. Using technology to automate your business processes, etc. So, I know you've engaged on lots of digital transformation initiatives. Are there things that you can share with the community, or just, observations, challenges, and or opportunities that you've encountered as you've executed on these digital transformation initiatives?
Well, something you mentioned was operational efficiency. I think commonly in enterprise technology leadership and business circles, so we emphasize things like operational efficiency. And
Yeah.
often there's a lot of opportunity to use tech to reduce OpEx and save money, right? But are we thinking about our market, our customers, our products, our services? That's where I go first. And corporate IT, frankly, is something I've not had much interest or spent much time with the bulk of my career.
Hmm.
So, to put it simply, put a CTO hat on or a
Mm.
chief product officer hat on
Right.
and think about how you're providing value to your marketplace. And then, like the corporate IT stuff, that's easy. Hire a good CIO or some good tech leaders. Those are mostly solved problems.
Hmm.
In fact, I'd say that organizations that have a long history of operating a certain way to build modern capabilities through engineering might have to do that in ways that aren't directly tied to the traditional organization. We see this model with R&D firms within our corporate organizations, where we spin up an R&D organization where they're trying to solve business problems, but they're not tied to the slower processes the primary corporation operates with.
Right.
So sometimes we have to get creative. I won't say it's easy if we're a 20 or 100-year organization in a traditional industry, but look at what the startups are doing in your industry,
Hmm.
because they can
Yeah.
execute and they can do so quickly,
Hmm.
and they're not held back by some of the traditional beliefs in the industry
Right.
frequently.
Yeah. One way to the other way to think about digital transformation, or at least one of the elements of it, especially when you're talking about partnering with startups and so forth that might not have the most robust um, controls in place from a security perspective, um, could lead to risk, from a data privacy and security perspective. What advice would you give to businesses and individuals to better protect their data, especially those that aspire to digitally transform their business?
Well, grounding in security and risk as it relates to larger organizations working with younger, smaller organizations, I'll say that often these smaller organizations are better at security than the bigger ones because they were built using modern paradigms
Yeah.
that are uh, y- built that way from the start.
Right, right,
We
right.
don't have the challenges of the flat network and the 20-year-old legacy enterprise software that's no longer supported, but a huge profit center for an important part of the business. Now, as far as risk, I think often our third party vendor risk management processes are a bit overzealous. We get too tactical, too quick.
Hmm.
What data is involved? What access is involved? Network access. And often a lot of the things we're doing either don't have that much risk or we can use them differently to reduce that risk.
Mm.
And occasionally there's the business impact scenario if it where if it's part of a key part of our business operations or tied directly to our value creation for our customer, that might be higher risk too.
Right.
But I think by default, a lot of the things we spend time stressing over as it relates to working with third parties isn't that risky if we frame the engagement in the
Mm.
right way. But we do have to look at it. We do have to think about it. If we're not managing the risk involved with the people and vendors and companies we work with, well, we might have a big issue come of it. But that's not only security risk, that's financial risk, that's business risk. It's holistic. And
Agree.
but we'd rather talk about uh, what encryption ciphers they have implemented in one of their web apps. Is it AS 128 or 256?
Right.
Both are very secure. Does it matter?
Well, at least for the time being, and then when quantum computing makes its place, maybe it'll be a different equation. I don't know. We'll see. It's hard to predict the future, in my opinion. But yeah, you are
I
right.
hesitated saying that, but there is a mathematical model that shows the physics of breaking AS 128 are
Yeah.
theoretically near impossible. Now,
Hmm.
that's based on our current understanding. Things change, and maybe there's a
Sure.
flaw, but it's pretty resilient based on our current understanding.
Yeah.
Quantum computing, we'll see.
We'll see, man. And artificial intelligence is it's a bold new future, man. So hey, man, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate the time. I want to be respectful of your time. Before we wrap up, I do want to ask you about that awesome photo of yourself in the background with outstretched arms. Are you in the Rockies? Like, I understand you're a big skier.
That's right. I'm very passionate about that. Coming back to our anchor word today, I was fortunate to have my mom teach me when I was very young.
Hmm.
I went to Chile last August
Mm.
to ski at Portillo. So that's a photo from that adventure.
Wow,
Fantastic
man.
trip. I'd I'd wanted to ski in North American summer for many years. The pandemic delayed that trip for a little bit, but managed to pull it off last year.
Wow. Congratulations, man. That sounds epic. Very cool, man.
Yeah, ton of fun. My wife would prefer the beach, but give me the mountains. And
I'm with you.
I like all adventures.
I'm with
Beach,
you, man.
mountains.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Well, Warner, thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I'm really honored to include you in my tribe of mentors. I've learned a lot. I know the community is going to get a lot out of this when it gets published. Just in closing, I would just ask you. There are folks in our tech community, in our business community, that aspire to follow in your footsteps. Are there any final thoughts or advice that you'd like to give to those folks?
In our culture, we get so focused on outcomes. We look at the end result and think, "Wow, that how did that get there?" And that must have been impossible. I don't see it. The small things we do every day compound, and at a certain point, it might look like a really big thing.
Yeah,
So work on it. Think about where you want to go. Get better every day, and we'll all do good things together.
wonderful. Focus on the journey, man. Progress, not perfection.
Oh, absolutely. Journey is what it's all about. Result or the end result is a time limited moment.
Hell yeah, man. Well said. Well, thank you, Warner. Really appreciate it, man.
Thank you, Sean. Been my honor to join you as well. If anyone wants to reach out, hit me up on LinkedIn or reach out at hello.gammaforce.io. Let me know how I can help. I mentioned this podcast, and it will help me know that it's not a random spam message. Thanks
Awesome.
again, Sean.
Well said, man. All right. See you later, man.